There have been rivalries in previous decades that seemed to be in that same category as Oklahoma State. They died. They've been dismissed. People remember them depending on their age. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Pitt, West Virginia, Pitt, Penn State. There have been a number of them that may not seem like a big deal now for people that are a little bit younger, but if you remember back to the 80s, the 90s, whenever they died, they were huge. Nebraska and Oklahoma played every Thanksgiving weekend, whether it typically was on that Friday, and those games were enormous. Well, Nebraska left. They were dissolved. The games were not played. Now they've got a home and home series, but basically the rivalry ended. And again, the same Pitt and Penn State, they played the last weekend of the season. That was an enormous game when Pitt was at a different status level at that point. I'm talking Dan Marino days. And that game was enormous. It's not, they will sign a home and home series every once in a while and play. So also to your point, Jason, if you look at the SEC situation, I'm almost assuredly thinking that they're going to a 9-game schedule. So if they go to a 9-game conference schedule, that leaves 3 non-conference games. And if Oklahoma commits to always playing Oklahoma State, they want to be able to play other national games out of conference. And if they play Oklahoma State every year, and if Oklahoma State continues to be a capable fringe top 25 team, and then Oklahoma's going out and scheduling USC and Ohio State and whomever else, well, that schedule, they're not going to schedule like that every year, and nor should they be expected to.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know, I think we've given the SEC a little bit of flack in terms of from the outside looking in at those games that they play in November. But you know, it makes sense when you have a stronger gauntlet, so to speak, that you go through to give the, you know, if for nothing else, to give some of the kids a break in terms of what that looks like each and every week. And you know, you talk about the rivalries and stuff. You know, you've got a lot of, you know, existing rivalries that are in place. You know, you talked about the Thanksgiving weekend. You know, I think one of the I mean, you're almost certainly going to see Texas A&M play on Thanksgiving weekend again, just to get where that's at. And I think, and that's one of the things that's going to be interesting to me. If you don't put Texas and Texas A&M in the same pod, that's the way they do. Do they still play each other every year? You know, you probably don't see that happen, but you know, at least they're playing each other more regularity than they have obviously in the past. So, I think that's also something to think about, because there'll be some rivalries that will be rekindled. Oklahoma and Arkansas might be a game that you see on Thanksgiving weekend as well. You know, now I'm kind of going into this, and I think, you know, there's some comments here about Fox versus ESPN, and you know, and we talked about that last Wednesday, Mark, that you know, this could end up being a battle between ESPN and Fox, and it looks like behind the scenes it is, and it's going to be for control over, you know, one of the, obviously the Fox still has some stuff with the Big Ten, and so they're not gonna completely go away, but I think it's, you know, it's a feather in ESPN's cap to get Oklahoma and Texas as a predominant, you know, ESPN network there. But you know, and there's some other comments that we've talked through about what the fit looks like in the SEC. I think Oklahoma is this year is a big year for Oklahoma and Texas for that matter, but Oklahoma is very I think they're much better positioned to make this move right now than they were 5 years ago, with how much they've been able to improve the talent particularly on the defensive side of the ball, particularly at the line of scrimmage. So I think that's certainly helpful. Now Texas, you know, they really haven't done anything in the last 10 years. You know, so you know, nothing to write home about. Yeah, they made the Big 12 championship game, but they did not, you know, certainly didn't win that game, and they've not been in the college football playoffs. So I think this is a big year for them. If they throw out a 9-3 season and, you know, potentially make it to the, you know, potentially make it to the Big 12 championship game, I think that's a good position for them to be in. However, if they throw out like a 7-5 or 8-4, that probably translates to maybe a 5-7, 6-6, in the SEC. So maybe they're not as uniquely positioned as Oklahoma is. So I think that's going to be something that's very critical for Oklahoma and Texas going into this season, but maybe more specifically Texas.
West Virginia fan chimed in just to say good luck to Texas and OU. It was fun playing you. Odd situation for West Virginia just from a historic standpoint in regards to just leaving, after years and years and decades. I started watching college football in the late 70s, so West Virginia being an independent. Then, of course, the Big East is formed. They stay in the Big East through the end of the conference, I believe, around 2010. When did they jump in the Big 12? Like 2011 or 12?
Yeah, 12.
Yeah, so in 2011, yes, that was the year actually that West Virginia and Geno Smith showed up at the Orange Bowl as the Big East champions and annihilated Clemson. And pretty much that was Clemson's move to go get Brent Venables from Oklahoma to revamp their defense because Geno Smith hung up 70 points on Clemson, and that was West Virginia's deja vu to the the Big East to go to the Big 12. So they've only been in a conference for like 8 to 9 football seasons, and now they're looking for another home. So,
yeah, I don't know. I still think that West Virginia is probably the biggest player, almost going forward, because they seem to be such a great fit for the ACC. Now, I don't know how that will, if the ACC is ready to extend an invitation to West Virginia. Do they feel like that? Do they have to add 2? If they feel like that they have to add 2, then maybe it's not a big slam dunk. But if they're comfortable adding 1, I think West Virginia is probably better positioned than anyone else. We have a gentleman, Travis Knob, who writes for us at Last Word on Sports covers West Virginia. He's done a lot of looking at. We exchanged some discussion this morning. He's done a lot of looking at, from a television exposure perspective, how comparing West Virginia versus the rest of the ACC in terms of viewership, what does that look like? And they're pretty much, from his analysis, they're pretty much right on par with a lot of the teams in the ACC. So I think the fear is that West Virginia could get potentially left behind and go maybe fall into more of a group of 5 conference. But I think they're positioned well to maybe be in a position to potentially move to the ACC if they're ready to make that move.
Jason, I've discovered that I've got a ready-made topic for a live stream. I'm going to go on my main channel possibly and ask people why they hate ESPN. I hear this all the time, but I guess it was just more concentrated with the conversation we were having about the TV networks, and just a number of people just, bo, 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 bo. I hate ESPN just repeatedly. I've got my own take on that. I was there for 19 years. So they were certainly good to me in many respects, not necessarily at the end, but very good to me, and paid me every 2 weeks for 19 years. So I've got my take on it, but I would love to hear everybody's take on ESPN. That would be, I think the product's phenomenal. Certainly if they stay out of the social and political arena, that would be best. All right.
Yeah.
Great discussion, Jason. When does Oklahoma go to fall camp?
So they start next week. I don't know the exact date. I'll get that for you, but we should be able to start talking about some on-the-field stuff, right? It's kind of funny. We were marching down the Big 12, the Big 12 top 10 in terms of position rankings, and super, super excited about the season. Not that this changes anything, but it kind of made us a little bit. So excited to actually get back to the field. It kind of gets lost that we're almost less than that. We're 4 weeks away tomorrow from the season starting, and this seems like all this off the field stuff that we're talking through, which is obviously very, very important, groundbreaking for college football, but doesn't negate the fact that we're very close to the season starting. And the fall camp gets kicked off next week for Oklahoma.
I don't remember. I'm so mixed up on which live stream was which one and which video was which. But as soon as this news broke, and of course we had you on with Tony to discuss it. I don't know if it was that live stream or they all did extremely well.
Yeah.
But there was one in particular live stream. We had right around 900 people in live, and the live stream did like 15 or 16,000 views. Anything, and then I tried to figure out every possible angle I could take at this because people were wanting expansion talk, realignment talk. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been such a crazy off season, Mark, when there's the transfer portal's blown up and NIL, has been crazy, and then the college football playoff, there's certain expansion to 12 teams, and what we thought was 2013, and then this bombshell. It's been, it's kind of funny where we were a year away. A year ago, we had talked about whether or not we were going to have a season, and now we're having groundbreaking discussion here in the off season. It's fun. I think it gets us, obviously gets us maybe even more excited for the season to get started.